Hello and welcome back. I'm Jaedius, and today we're going to be talking about how to set up your heads-up display or your HUD elements and your user interface before you get started on your adventures across Eorzea. So here we are on the character creation screen, and we're just going to enter the world and begin to play. As we're loading into the game, I'm just going to point out that I went ahead and I skipped the initial cutscene to avoid any spoiler alerts. And as soon as you get into the game, you're going to be bombarded with a couple of tutorial menus and stuff. Go ahead and skip that. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to show you how to set up your user interface and your heads-up display. Okay? So if you're on a PC and you just hit the escape button, you go down to your HUD layout or your heads-up display. And it's going to pull up this grid with all these windows, and it's very messy and crazy looking. Alright, I'm going to go over and I'm going to talk about the different things that you can do with each one of these abilities, or each one of these windows, so that you can set your interface up in a way that's going to really benefit you and help you be able to get through your adventures, without having to wonder like, oh, where do I find this information, where do I find that information. So to get started, we're just going to do the basic hotbars. So I have a specific way that I like to set things up. I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'll explain kind of how I'm doing some stuff. So the first thing, these are just basic 12-button hotbars. Okay, if you have hotbar 1 selected and you go to this little gear next to the current UI element, hotbar 1, to open up your UI element settings, it's going to open up this little window right here. And from here, what you can do is you can actually change the size of your bars depending on what your resolution is. You can make them bigger, smaller. I set mine at 80%. And you can even change the shape of your bars so that instead of it just being 12 buttons across, you can have 6 across and 2 down, or 4 across and 3 down. I do the 3x4s just because I have one of those 12-button mice, and I set my bar up where the buttons correspond on the mouse itself. So I go ahead and save that, and then I can move it to wherever I want. And you can do the same thing for all of your other hotbars. Again, you have to do each one individually as you go ahead and adjust the shape and the size for that. So those are your hotbars. Now, I usually run with all of my hotbars open because each hotbar has like specific abilities and stuff on them that I want. Another important thing, if you target one of your bars right here and you right click on it, you'll see the text turn from blue to white and back again. When the text is blue, that means that that bar is going to be hidden once you close out of your HUD display. So I'm going to make sure that the windows that I want are lit up with white text instead of blue text. And this can be a little time consuming when you try and get things just right for your play style. I'm not going to go through every single window and adjust everything perfectly the way that I want in this video. I'll do that afterwards. I just want to show you like how to do some of this stuff. Now, this window up here, this is your party list. Okay, your party list is going to have a lot of information. So if you go to your UI settings, the one thing that you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that your party list, specifically if you're going to play a healer, is a little bit bigger than the rest of your UI, because there's a lot of information that you're going to want to look on there. It's also a good idea for tanks because it's going to show where everyone, where their threat is on the enemy that you have targeted is going to be displayed on that party list. So I always make my party list just a little bit bigger than the rest of my interface. And just go ahead and adjust some of these other windows here, get them cleaned up. So alliance list, these are your other groups if you're in a larger than 8-man raid or an alliance raid. You also have, if you do PvP, you'll have players that pop up in those two windows there in a PvP environment. The rest of these hotbars we can just keep turned off for now. Pet hotbar, put that one up there. Alright, I like my experience at the top, and I like my health and mana at the bottom right there. Now, the progress bar. This is your ability progress. Every time you cast a spell or do an ability that has a cast time attached to it, or if you're interacting with the world, you're going to see the progress right there on that bar. So if you're the kind of person that needs to look at your hotbars and see when your abilities are your next ability is gonna be up, you want to make sure that you're putting your progress bar close to your hotbars, so you're not having to look at multiple different locations on your screen, just for ease of access to that information. And then your target bar. Now this is important, okay? So your target bar, as is, will just display the health of your target and then any debuffs and buffs that your target may have. But if you open up the options, you can actually set to display the target info independently. And what it does is it breaks up the window so that it's your target, the status effects, enfeebling and buffing, and the target's progress bar, so you can see when your target is actually casting something. I always split mine up, and then I set my the target progress bar to 120%, so now, or 140%. So now it's nice and big, so when an enemy that I have targeted is casting a spell that I can interrupt, it'll be flashing red right there, and I know, big huge bar, I'm gonna have to hit my interrupt. And we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll move that down here. So my target bar right there, status effect enfeeblement, so I know what debuffs it has on it. And then we'll go ahead and put the target progress bar right there. So right underneath my character, I'll be able to see his cast bars. And then this right here is your limit gauge. Now your limit gauge in any other Final Fantasy, after you've had enough, taken enough damage or done enough damage or had a certain number of combat turns, you will have filled up this power bar that allows you to do a super attack. Whenever you're in a group of 4 people or more, you're going to have access to limit breaks. And each role has a different kind of limit breaks. The tank limit break, it will put a damage shield around everybody that's going to absorb a large amount of damage, make them invulnerable to some attacks. The healer limit break will either do a huge area of effect heal and can even resurrect allies in an 8-man group. And then the damage dealers, you'll have either an AoE attack depending on your class, or a single target limit break attack. Both of them do a large amount of damage. If you want to use a limit break on a boss in a dungeon or a raid, it's always better to let a melee damage dealer do their limit break, because it's going to have the highest single target damage out of all of the limit breaks. And if in certain cases there's going to be a lot of enemies that you need to kill quickly, and you're going to want one of your spellcasters or range DPS to do their limit breaks, because it's going to be able to hit more enemies at once. So put my limit gauge right there, and these are my enhancements or buffs. And your scenario guide. So your scenario guide, this lets you know where in the main story you're currently at. and I'll show you more on that later. Status info other and focus target. Now you can set a focus target so that you'll always have your focus target on your screen even if you target something else. Really great for healers to have that set up in a place that's easy to see. And then my menu, inventory, gil, this is your currency. And then I like my notices right there in the middle of the screen. Just get some of this cleaned up a little bit. Get these out of the way. Alright, those aren't going to be visible yet. And then every class is going to have some sort of gauge, which will actually unlock later on in the game. I just like to keep mine down there so it's easy for me to see, because this is where, you know, the majority of the information that I'm going to need is going to be right here at the bottom of the screen, right underneath my character. Alright, so I think we're all set up right here. One last thing, so the cross hotbar. Now this is very important for people who are either playing with a controller or want the option to play with a controller. This is where that's going to display, and that is a whole other video I'm going to have to make on setting up a controller. So once you've got your HUD layout where you want it, go ahead and hit save and then close out, and now you can see your HUD is nice and cleaned up. The only thing that you can't change in your HUD is the chat box. In order to move the chat box, you just hold left click over the general button, move it where you want it to go. I put mine usually down here in the corner, and then I'll extend it out with the adjustment corner right there. So now that your HUD is all set up, a couple things that are important. So right now, you know, only 2 of these hotbars are hotkeyed. You know, your controls might not be exactly the way that you want. So go ahead and hit the escape button again. Go to system configuration. Now, in system configuration, you can set up your display settings, whether you want, you know, full screen windowed, borderless windowed, change your resolutions, your gamma, frame rates. You can adjust your sound settings. When you first start the game, before you've adjusted your sound settings, all of these are going to be all the way up, and the game is going to be very, very loud. So you might want to adjust some of these lower. Okay, you can change your graphics settings, a whole lot of stuff that you can do from here. So go ahead, look through, make sure you play with some of these and get the game set up the way that you like. After that, go open up your character configuration. Now, there's a couple things in here that are a huge benefit to set up before you get started. Under control settings, you have the option of setting to skip playback of previously viewed scenario cutscenes, dungeons, transportation, housing. If you don't highlight these, every time you enter a dungeon, it's going to play a cutscene as you enter that dungeon. Now you can skip the cutscenes manually by pressing the escape button, and a menu will pop up. Do you really want to skip this cutscene? You can hit yes or no. Or you can go ahead and set these so that you don't have to do that. It'll automatically skip them once you've seen them once. The other thing, I also play reverse or invert mouse and apply those. Okay. The other thing is under control settings, under character, the battle effects. Now, if you have show all and you don't have a really good computer, you're going to see everyone's spell effects all the time. And a lot of times you'll be hanging out in town and people will just be sitting there spamming spell effect after spell effect, and it can get really laggy when there's a lot of people using spells and abilities. So what I do is I always show all on my own, I show limited on party, and I show none on other players. Now I have a pretty good computer. I can run all of these all at the same time, but it gets very distracting, and when you have a bunch of people fighting an enemy and you're seeing all of their spell effects, it actually is kind of blinding, and you can miss, you know, avoidable damage, ground effects, and things like that with all of the spell detail that's going on. So it's really a good idea to turn some of these spell details down. And then once you're done that, go to item settings. Okay, and you'll see the inventory interface. Now if you press the I button, it's going to bring up your inventory. And your inventory is broken up into 4 different inventory tabs, and then a crystal tab, and a key item tab. Now these are your quest items. Alright, but if you set this to expanded, and then you press the I button, now it has 2 windows open at the same time with an expanded key item interface and an expanded shard interface. This is going to make it so that if you have a ton of stuff in your inventory, you're going to be able to see a lot more of it at once without having to click through different windows to get to what you're trying to find. Very, very, very helpful. And I also set mine for my retainer because, as I mentioned in a previous video, at one point you're going to get retainers, which are going to act as bankers. They also sell things on the market board for you. You start off with 2, but you can purchase additional ones for like $1 for 2 of them on the MOG station if you need them. So that's pretty much it for that. The only other thing that I would suggest is under your hotbar settings. So again, you can change the shape of your hotbars from this window here by selecting the size and shape that you want here. And you can also share hotbars. So when you create a character in this game, you can play every job that there is on just one character. There's no need for alts as far as being able to experience different battle jobs, crafting jobs, and gathering jobs. You can be everything on one character. But because of that, you're going to have a ton of different abilities, and then some abilities are going to be usable across your characters. For example, sprint. Everybody can sprint, whether it's a battle job or a gathering job, you know, and your teleport buttons. So a great thing to do is to set it so that some of your bars are shared across all of your jobs. Now I have 1 through 6 usually, 1 through 5 as shared hotbars, and 6 through, or as you know, job specific bars, and then 6 through 10 is shared hotbars. So that if I change jobs, all my hotbars 6 through 10 are going to have the same abilities on them all the time. Through this, you can also set, you know, how you want names to display, whether you want the full name, if you want just the, you know, abbreviations or initials. You can change your chat size. So a lot of different things that you can put, or that you can fiddle with here. So that is just the basics. And then the last thing is keybinds. So we have 2 hotbars keybound and 2 that are not. So we check out the hotbar key bindings, 1 through $. I change these to shift. I change these to control. And you can see as you're changing them, it'll show up here. Now they won't take effect until you hit the apply button, but you'll know you're doing something wrong if you see the wrong hotbar lighten up. And last but not least, Alt. So I really like hotkeys. For me, they make the game a lot easier. I don't have to click. I'm not hunting around trying to find abilities. And the more I use them, you know, you get that muscle memory, and then you don't even need to look at your hotbar to know what ability you're going to do. I'm a huge advocate for hotkeys. Alright, so that is setting up your heads-up display and adjusting your interface for your gameplay. Thanks again for watching. This has been a Final Fantasy XIV Let's Play heads-up display and user interface tutorial. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share your favorite videos, and hopefully we'll see you next time.